Hello, good people. It's Professor Wachtel. The topic of this discussion is human nature in Plato's Republic. Plato's Republic is perhaps the most classic of all Plato's dialogues. It contains famous passages, including Plato's character Socrates' refutation of the sophist Thrasymachus, Plato's allegory of the cave, and Plato's theory of forms, illustrated by the allegory of the cave. And of course it contains discussion of Plato's ideal state, the Republic itself. Our discussion will focus on discovering Plato's theory of human nature as expressed through Plato's analogy of the city and the soul. So, we will be talking about some of the political ideas in Plato's Republic, but we will not be emphasizing the political ideas in the book. Any discussion of politics and society for our present purposes is entirely serving an examination of Plato's theory of human nature, his famous tripartite theory of the soul. Tripartite is really just a fancy word for three-part. To begin our discussion, I'd like to examine two fundamental concepts. First, I'd like to examine the concept of human nature, and then I would like to examine the concept of an analogy. When people are asked about the meaning of human nature, very often they respond by telling little stories about things that many people do. It is human nature to do this. It is human nature to do that. Many people will say it is human nature to be very much interested in one's own good. It is human nature to be aggressive. It is human nature to be loving. It is human nature to desire companionship. It is human nature to, many examples are possible. Discussions of human nature get risky when the aspects of human life being discussed are too specific. Why do I say this? Consider what is meant when we speak of the nature of a thing. Let us start with the nature of a non-human thing. Consider a rock. What is the nature of rock? The nature of rock is that which all rocks share. The nature of rock is that which all particular rocks share. The nature of rock is what makes rock rock. Not necessarily that kind of rock, although I like that kind of rock. When we speak of what makes rock rock, it is that which all rocks have in common. One could likewise speak of the nature of trees. The nature of trees is what all trees have in common. The nature of dogs is what all dogs have in common. The nature of water is what all water has in common. The nature of planets is what all planets have in common. It is what makes planets planets. It is what makes water water. It is what makes dogs dogs. When we speak of the nature of a thing, we are speaking of its definitive principle, that which makes it itself, or more accurately, that which makes it the kind of thing that it is. The nature of a thing is that which makes it the kind of thing it is. So what makes a human a human? What is it that all humans have in common by which we understand them as humans? Whatever it is, the nature of humans is that which underlies all human actions, all human behaviors. Thus, it is risky to define human nature too much in terms of specific human behaviors, because as soon as you find one human who does not do that specific action, does not do that specific behavior, you have a counterexample. A counterexample demonstrates that the definition has not been well drawn. A counterexample shows that the idea, the principle that is said to be definitive of a thing is not actually definitive of that thing. Some people will say human beings are all ambitious. If a human being could be found that has no need for ambition and does not practice any form of ambition, then to define human nature in terms of ambition is questionable. Given the wide variety of human action, given the wide variety of human behavior, given the wide variety of human cultures, it makes most sense to think about human nature in terms of fundamentals that unify all human beings. Some might think of thinking about human nature in this way as a little bit unusual. It is fairly common these days for human beings to focus a great deal on human difference, what makes this group of humans different from that group of humans, what makes this human person different from other human persons. And there are many good reasons for our interest in human difference. I don't mean to underplay any of them, but when we speak of human nature, we are isolating that which can differ, that bedrock of human sameness that is the foundation that allows for the great variety of human variability. So, study of human variability is enhanced by the best grasp we can have of underlying human nature, of underlying human likeness or similarity. Just as our understanding of the great variety of rocks is enhanced by our understanding of the basics that all rocks share in common, or our understanding of dogs is enhanced by a grasp of the basics that all dogs have in common. A wide variety of philosophers take up the topic of human nature. In Plato's Republic, the strategy by which Plato goes about discussing human nature is a bit roundabout. There is no section in Plato's Republic where Plato writes, and now we will talk about human nature. The topic of human nature comes in as a part of the political discussion. As you know, Plato's Republic starts with a discussion of justice, a question of what justice is. And Plato's character Socrates and Socrates' interlocutors have no easy time addressing this question. Ultimately, Socrates, Plato's character Socrates, will answer the question of what human nature is through the analogy of the city and the soul. Before we get into the analogy of the city and the soul, it will help us to put some special focus on the topic of analogy. What is an analogy? If you've taken some standardized tests, and I'm sure everyone who is watching this has taken some standardized tests, you will probably have encountered analogy questions. They are written as follows. How would you read this? Touchdown is to football as blank is to baseball. This is a very simple analogy question of the form that you might see on a standardized test. Touchdown is to football as blank is to baseball. And then you'll see some answer choices. Answer choice A, field. Answer choice B, pitcher. Answer choice C, squirrel. Answer choice D, run. Answer choice E, beer. How would you go about answering this question? I think most people would immediately rule out squirrel, as a squirrel has very little, actually the squirrel has nothing to do with the sport of baseball. I suppose a squirrel could run onto the baseball field and disrupt the game, but that does not have anything to do with what you would normally find during a baseball game. What about beer? Answer choice E, beer. You will commonly have beer served in the stadium during a baseball game, and there are commonly touchdowns scored in a football game. But there are differences here too. I mean, after all, the touchdown is an action that occurs. It is something that happens on the field of a football game, and the beer is served in the stands. So maybe these are not very much alike. What about field? This sounds like a better choice. A touchdown happens on a field, and baseball is played on a field. But this is not a very close relationship. There's some relationship, not a close relationship. What about pitcher? Well, touchdowns occur in football, and pitchers exist in baseball. But this, again, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect here. There seems to be a significant disconnect here. The touchdown is an action that occurs in a football game, and a pitcher is a player in a baseball game. What about answer choice D, run? Why is this the correct answer? In football, even people who are not experts on football like me know this, a touchdown is the action in the game that puts points on the scoreboard. Likewise, in baseball, a run is the action in the game, the scoring of a run that puts points on the board in a baseball game. A touchdown serves a particular function in football. A run serves the same function in baseball. Touchdowns are scored in football. Runs are scored in baseball. There is a difference, of course. How one goes about making the scoring move in football differs from how one goes about making the scoring move in baseball. There's yet another difference. The number of points scored in football is different from the number of points scored in baseball. But among the answer choices that we have, what we've discovered is that there is a functional similarity between touchdowns in football and runs in baseball. Touchdown is to football as run is to baseball, allows us to isolate in our thinking a relevant similarity between the two actions in their respective sports. Each serves the same function in its context. Thus we say they are analogous to one another. They share a relevant property such that we can say one is functionally the same as the other. Plato's analogy of the city and the soul rests upon finding functional similarities between parts of the city and parts of the soul. All of this occurs in the context of a larger discussion of the nature of justice. In identifying the parts of the city, Plato's character Socrates arrives at a definition of justice. In identifying the parts of the soul, Plato's character finds justice in the person and not just in the city. So we can say that Plato's analogy of the city and the soul reveals not only Plato's theory of human nature, but also of Plato's understanding of what it means for a person to be good. Plato's analogy of the city and the soul reveals not only the structure of the city, but also its goodness. And likewise, Plato's theory of the soul reveals not only the structure of the soul, but the foundation of its goodness. Thank you for watching. In my next discussion, I will take up the topic of how Plato's character Socrates introduces the discussion of the ideal city, and we will talk about the building of the ideal city in thought that will eventually reveal Plato's definition of justice.